Okay, I'm gonna hope beyond hope that this works. It's gonna be a very simple, short conversation on child psychology, child good mental health, and tragedies such as the massacre in Las Vegas. I heard a couple of things um, since what happened in Las Vegas happened, and I was greatly concerned that information by professionals is may not be meeting the mission. First statement that I want to make, and let me see if I can organize my technology to where I can get what I want. Excuse me, just getting over something. Okay, I might need to move something here. Okay, that's the first statement I want to make right here. This, if you're able to see the cursor, children are resilient. They don't process information like us adults, and that's one of the important things that needs to be brought out. Um, you know, we as adults process tragedies, hardship, whatever you want to call it, the way we have trained ourselves or others have trained us to process them. And apparently I'm going to start coughing, excuse me. This is my morning vitamin drink. Let me see here. So it's important that when we're dealing with children, we understand certain basics. The younger the child, the more resilient the child. If the child is far removed from the traumatic event, being a child of someone who who is directly related to someone who lost their life in a tragedy can, and let me be very specific, very adamant on this issue, can be traumatic and lead to a complicated emotional experience. Can. Not will, not has to, it can. And the point being is that children don't process information the way we do. They don't have experience. They don't have the reference point to see it as we see it. We, as we live, every year, every day, we're learning more, we're seeing more, we're experiencing more, and we're getting a better sense of life. Children have the disadvantage, and maybe maybe the advantage, because it protects them from things that would otherwise harm them, and harm them in a very bad way. Let me see what else what do I need to do? Okay, so that's very important. Now, on this, it's important to understand that age matters. A 4-year-old is going to behave different than a 10-year-old. And a 10-year-old may behave different than a 15-year-old and or a 20-year-old. And the point that needs to be made is, one, what are the adults in the room teaching children? So ultimately, how the child deals with it is the coping mechanisms that the child has been taught. Either the child has it through to talking to him or herself, and coming to some conclusions by themselves about life. They learn coping mechanisms. Maybe they're not healthy coping mechanisms, but they learn how to cope if no one else is there to provide them with the necessary information that they have. Now, if you have a person who is there, who is teaching, what needs to be learned and what the child needs to understand, then the child may develop a coping mechanism that is helpful. And may is a very big word. So the first thing that we need to understand is children do not process information like we do, and they're very resilient because they're not able to have that reference point. So they experience it and then they quickly return to who they are and what they do, which is playing with their toys. And another point that needs to be made is that age matters. The age of the child will matter because of what the child has been taught or what the child has taught himself or herself. Okay. And that's important. And the reason that is important because there's going to be a concerned one from the adult. And what I'm telling the adult is don't be over concerned. Okay. Let me see if I put it up here. I'm reading. There we go. What you should be doing, I'm working on this one right here, this little tile here. What we should be doing is evaluating the child after the event, whatever that event was. And it's understandable that there may be sadness, and there may be fear, and there may be anger, and there may be a combination or all of them together. It's understandable that there may be a change in behavior, but is it a permanent change? And we're better off dealing with this as teachers than controlling managers. But you have an event, you monitor the child. There is no reason to assume automatically that the child has to be suffering, or that the child has to be suffering and that suffering is so overwhelming that the child cannot deal with it. There's no reason to assume that. You monitor behavior, and if there's a change of behavior or troublesome behavior start to develop, then you start dealing with them. Okay. One of the things that we lack in modern society is discipline. Children don't listen to the instructions of their parents because parents are not very good teachers of values. That's basic. But let's just deal with it. So we have resilient children that they don't process information the way we do. They're limited in their ability to understand. And we as adults shouldn't complicate it. Okay, so we monitor, we look, we see. Now, the child may ask questions. Okay, the child's going to see this person crying or that person crying, or is going to hear about what happened, and the child may ask questions. See, and I'm noticing here that that I've already dealt with this, and dealing with what are these characters? I didn't put them there. Okay, we shouldn't assume the child should be troubled. Okay, they're gonna ask questions. But you don't give a detailed psychological study on how a person should be processing thoughts and emotions from watching people being slaughtered on TV. You don't. The smart thing to do is to ask the child, what do you think? And the child's going to tell you what they think. Most children will. Okay, if you do it in a healthy way, if you do it in a manner that the child feels self-conscious, the child feels like they're going to be ridiculed, then they're not going to have the confidence to speak. But you can ask a basic question. Well, tell me what you think about this. And they're going to tell you something. And your job is to evaluate what they have said and only correct minor errors. Okay? Be grateful that the child tells you, well, it was a bad man and he hurt good people. Leave it at that. Don't elaborate, don't add to it. You know, just be impressed that your child, if it's your child or someone else's child, be impressed that they have put it in those terms. Okay, what if they tell you something that is without, if it doesn't raise flags, if their statement does not raise flags, leave it as is. You know, and of course you say, well, that's very smart of you. That's a very good way to see things. It's very healthy. Leave it at that. Don't over-explain. Don't embellish. Just leave it at that. You're going to have, because of age and experience and closeness to a person who may have lost their life, you're going to have different statements. And you're going to have emotionally volatile statements, especially from children that are older, that understand more. who may be susceptible to their peer groups and how their peer groups frame things. It is your job to be a good teacher. I'm going to tell you how I put things when I do videos or essays on the issues of death, divorce, loss of job, traumatic events in the human experience. My principal statements on death are that none of us can travel back in time and bring someone back from the dead. None of us. So the only thing that's left for us is acceptance. And acceptance in a healthy way. I've told people, just because you're divorced or the relationship broke up or the person died doesn't mean that you have to stop loving them. A lot of the complications from the conclusion that I have come from meditating on these issues, a lot of that pain and suffering comes from us trying to stop ourselves from loving that person. Now, continuing to love that person doesn't mean they're coming back to life, and doesn't mean that they're going to come back into your life. And no, you're divorced, you're separated, the person has passed on. That's important to know. But we're here, and by being here, we have the opportunity to take advantage of life, look at what's good, be positive, look at it for fun entertainment. Don't be obsessed on the negative and the pain and the suffering. All of us have power. All of us can accomplish it. All of us can set goals. All of us can set objectives to accomplish those goals. All of us can look at life as what it is, and life is beautiful. We have the choice of looking at life as if it's something that it's ugly. We do. And I say that in this conversation because as you're interacting with your children, are you teaching them a healthy perspective of life? Or are you teaching them a negative perspective of life? Ranting and raving and being irrational and yelling at the kids are good. And if they did something wrong, it's because you never taught them the right way. And giving a lesson once isn't a good teacher. A good teacher keeps reinforcing the lesson and understands that you got a developing child, from when they're months old to when they develop into an adult. And throughout that journey, you need to be there as a wise, loving teacher, not an irrational control manager. Too many parents think that their job is to be managers of their children. No, your job is to be a mentor, to teach values, to help that child learn how to manage their emotions and how to have a good life experience. And a lot of that has to do with responsibility. So let us review, because when I organize this, it's going to be short. It has to be short. Number one, children are resilient. They don't process information like you and I do, so there's no need to complicate their understanding with our understanding. Okay? When they ask questions, if they should ask questions, it is a good strategy to say, well, what do you think about this? And when they explain what they think about that, you find what is good in the statement and you praise it. And if there's a need for a correction, a simple correction. There's no need to over-explain. Now, with children of different ages, you need to develop a better strategy. But all you're doing is having a conversation and teaching values about health, how to put things in balance, how life things are going to happen. And we have to be prepared to accept some of the things that happen in life and accept it in a healthy manner. Okay? After an event, if you're concerned about the child's welfare, you monitor the child. You observe the child. You see, you're looking for you're looking for anger, fear, and depression. Changes in behavior. A happy child is sad. That's a change in behavior. An introverted child who likes to spend time alone, all of a sudden is picking fights with brothers and sisters, coming out of the room and picking fights, changes in behavior. And what do? You don't scold. You don't yell at the child. Okay? You try to engage the child in conversation. And that's what I mean by you're teaching your children coping mechanisms that they will use down the road. And the point of all of this is to make sure that parents aren't all of a sudden taking on the role of psychiatrist and or psychologist and treating their children like mental health cases. The child will tell you by him or herself, by their behavior. They'll go straight up to you and tell you, I feel sad, and this is why I feel sad. And your job is to comfort, to educate, but age-appropriate lessons. You don't have the same conversation with a 6-year-old that you would have with a 17-year-old. And throughout the age of the child, you're teaching values, and you're teaching values so the child gets a healthy perception of life, understands life, and when events present themselves, is able to put their emotions in the proper places, to have emotional balance, good, healthy emotional balance, and deal with things as they present themselves. So to review, and this time I'm not going to stop myself, children are resilient. They don't process information like us, so we shouldn't automatically assume that they're going to be in a serious mental health attitude. Okay, we shouldn't assume that they're going to be in trouble. Okay, we need to understand that children are different ages, and you deal with children of different ages according to their age. Small children, you don't need to complicate with their life with over-explaining. Older children, you want to, you should have been building a good coping mechanism, good coping structures. But if you have not, then you start with mature conversations so the child's able to understand when you break up with a romantic interest, when you lose a job, when there's death in the family, there's a healthy way to process that pain, and then there's an unhealthy way, and the better way is the healthy way. Okay, what ultimately is going to tell you if it's a significant event for the child is change in behavior. And if you had a happy-go-lucky kid, and all of a sudden that child is exhibiting anger or fear or depression or a combination, if not all, then the event is taking a toll. But you have the skills. You don't need to you don't have to go run into a psychiatrist or a psychologist. You just need to engage the child in conversation. Never leave a child alone to him or herself. Should have made a top for that, but I'll deal with that right now. Never leave a child alone to him or herself, because you're going to start thinking, and then they're going to come to conclusions about how to deal with the pain. Excuse me. And we have examples of people who choose the wrong choice to deal with pain, specifically drugs, alcohol, if not sex. Okay, so you need to be there to help your child. And if you're there to help your child and you don't overreact, and you don't complicate your own child's emotional experience, and if you're a monitor and you're looking to see if the child is exhibiting problem behavior after an event, and you already know what you're going to tell the child, you're going to tell the child, I love you, I'm always here for you, I'm going to protect you, and I understand why you're feeling the way you're feeling. And as you go through life, you're going to experience these things, and it's good to understand that there's a lot of stuff we just are beyond our control. But that doesn't mean that the rest of our life has to be something bad. See, there's a healthy way to give a healthy message to a child, but you got to understand what child you're talking to. And what brought what I was concerned about is the mental health professionals that I heard on the news speaking about how to talk to children, if they were to see this on the television, or their friends would talk about it, or somehow the child would come to, you know, to be exposed. The professionals were dealing with it as if the child had developed psychological issues. And I'm going to tell you that it's not automatic. In fact, the majority of the time, many children will not develop any psychological issues. And if they develop any complications of thought and emotion, is going to be because the parents, the adults, were overthinking it and giving more information than they should, and they were conditioning their children to negative emotional responses. So that's why we need to be very careful about how we speak to children, and we need to be very careful about those siblings that like to torture their younger siblings. You need to put the family in order, and it has to be a unit, starting with mom and dad working together, unified, to teach their children with wisdom and love. In all things life. In all things life. And I think I said it. And if you want to do something else, I guess you're welcome to do something else. But you're going to hurt the kid. And there's no need for you to hurt your kid. Just be a wise, smart person who understands the nature of your child, the age of your child, and the mental resources your child's going to need as they develop and as they confront challenges in life. Thank you for listening, and I wish you well.